Welcome back, everyone, to the Mastering Runeterra podcast with Jay and Bay. Today, we're going to go over what's hot on the ladder, what we've been playing, and we're going to deep dive into tournaments. Where do you find them? What do you play? How do you make a lineup? All that good stuff. What do you say, Bay?
Yeah, it sounds good. I'm pretty excited about it. Love talking about tournaments.
I can tell by the sound of your voice, you've never been more excited for anything in the history.
Give me a bit of a break.
Okay, well, before we get into tournaments, let's talk about the ladder. That sweet ladder. I just made diamond a couple days ago after being hard stuck in plat for forever, and I'm quickly on my way to masters. I'll let you go first. What have you been seeing on the ladder? What have you been winning with? What are your thoughts?
A lot of stuff, but real quick, did you know you beat me to diamond?
I did know that, yes, and I secretly self high-fived myself off camera.
Yep, you beat me to diamond. Yeah, I've been playing a lot of shit mostly. I spent the first week trying to make Karma the best deck. It's not. Spoiler. But I was playing everything. Zoe, Karma, Ezreal. They're just my favorite decks. And then I switched to decks that win. What I've been playing a lot that I really liked is Henneky's Nightfall aggro list. The Diana Aphelios deck. So strong. With the Doom Beasts and 3 Temples, 3 Star Shaping, and the new 2-mana burst card, Unto Dusk, that triggers a Nightfall effect. This deck's it's just been doing it for me. It's like the pound for pound fighter that I like to have. It's just a strong deck in a vacuum, and it can go toe to toe with all the other decks in the late game because you have the 3 copies of Temple and the 3 copies of Star Shaping.
Totally, 100%. I've been playing that deck as well. Real quick side note, all the decks we talk about today will be linked in the description or notes down below. We got some flack for not doing that last time. Sorry, we'll do it this time. Yeah, Henneky's Nightfall deck, absolutely love it. I've been running it. I don't know what my record is, but it's very good. I went from, I think, the bottom of Diamond to I think I'm Diamond 2 now. Mostly just winning, just crushing people. Yeah, deck's fantastic. It's got a little bit of everything, you know. It's kind of like a TF Fizz type situation where you can go aggro if you have to. You can get aggressive. You can, make big units with the Temple, or you can Star Shaping, invoke some things up and kill them that way. You've even got an Atrocity kind of combo kill. Yeah, really big fan of the deck. Interested to get your thoughts though. What do you think are some of the maybe bad matchups for the deck? Because I'm beating most things, but I'm like, it almost feels too good. I haven't run into a lot of TF Fizz. What are your thoughts on maybe that matchup and some of the other top decks?
It's not great, but it's totally winnable. You run like 5 silence effects, I think. It's like 3 Hush and 2 Moonlight Affliction. So like on their big Mind Meld turn, you're just like, zzz, 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 right? You just hit them all and then block. I find that it mostly comes down to if I draw my champions or not. If I don't have Diana or Aphelios, I don't have any way to control the board. And if I don't have any way to control the board, their ballistic bots get to go off. They keep hitting me with Fizz. They get to do the Twisted Fate flip on 5 that I hate so goddamn much. So yeah, the deck's super strong, but in that matchup, look really hard for your champions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, speaking of Twisted Fate, leveling up on turn 5, what do you think? Do you think Twisted Fate needs a buff?
Yeah, I think if you made him a 4/4 and 3 mana, then he'd probably be playable. But
okay, yeah. Not such a meme. Okay, well, I guess maybe some people might not agree with that take. Do you think maybe he needs a nerf?
Yeah, I definitely in the nerf Twisted Fate camp. I don't like to nerf things that are good. Like, I don't think you have to, right? It's something's allowed to be the best. But Twisted Fate just pushes decks out of the format. Because if I can't interact with turn 4 Twisted Fate, you have turn 5 Twisted Fate like 50% of the time. It's insane. The pick a card on 4 into Twisted Fate blue card, into Rummage, throw away some stuff into Urchin, Zap, or the stress testing, discard that. Like, you're flipping him every single time. And this just pushes a lot of decks and strategies out of the meta. What I would really like to see is pick a card be 4 mana. I think that would slow down that overpower like early flip. Because again, I think cards are allowed to be the best. This Twisted Fate's just a step above the best.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I'm in the same boat as you. Like when people kind of always complaining, it's what we do. Anything that's really powerful that kind of sucks to get blown out by, like, oh, that thing, nerf it. But again, things are allowed to be good, but I agree also. I think Twisted Fate is a little too oppressive. Something needs to be changed. I'm not sure what. I don't want to see I don't want to see it cost 5 mana. I don't know if maybe making it 2/1s, just too far, but something. I don't know what exactly needs to be changed. What if blue card didn't draw you a card? If it gave you a mana? Doesn't seem quite good enough.
Horrible. People have talked about taking away the attune, taking away the mana, but it's Twisted Fate is the best. It sounds good, right? But the problem is that Twisted Fate is currently the best representative of his character in League of Legends. He's literally a carbon copy ported over. And if you take away, blue card, red card, and gold card are the exact same as they are in the game. Red card does AoE damage, gold card stuns on a single target, and blue card gives you mana back. And so if you took that away, I don't know, that just kind of feel bad.
What if it gave you 2 mana, but you didn't get to draw a card?
That's an interesting way to do it. I think that would make Twisted Fate much less powerful. I actually hadn't even considered that. I don't like it because I like drawing cards.
Me too.
But yeah, it's an option. I mean, there's tons of things. People are like, pick a card 4 mana, make him a 2/1, make him 5 mana, which I hate that one. Remove the draw card or the attune or whatever. I mean, I'm giving all these suggestions, but mostly just because people ask for my opinion and I need to have something to say. After seeing what Riot did with Ezreal, I have full confidence that they will find a good fix to the problem.
Yeah, I do as well. I don't know. And I don't know what the solution is, but I think both of us and a lot of people are in agreement that something needs to change.
Something
just a little
needs
bit.
to happen.
We just need a little tweak. Just a little tweak. Mm-hmm. Things are a little out of balance, and that's fine. And yeah, hopefully, I'd like to see that because speaking of the meta game, or maybe we'll wait for the meta game. But a lot of people are kind of saying that it hasn't changed a lot with the introduction of Shirama and the new cards, the new set, that we're still kind of in this like TF Fizz, Aphelios TF sort of meta. But as we talk about the next deck on our list here, maybe like some Lissandra Trundle, that deck is looking real hot. I'm interested to get your thoughts. Do you think is it tier 1? Is this deck good enough to bring to tournaments? What's the deal here? And is it going to shake up the metagame?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this deck. I think of it like it's almost like a TF Fizz killer. It's one of the only decks I've found that has a good matchup into TF Fizz often enough. This is the Ice Shard version with Ledros, which actually is no longer the flavor of the week. Now, Lissandra Trundle is combo oriented and is running Spectral Matron to cheat out Watcher on 8, which is pretty strong. You play Trundle and then you play Pillar. You copy Pillar with Fading Memories. Play another Pillar. That's 2. Get the Watcher in your hand. Play Spectral Matron. That's your 3rd 8 mana. Cheat out the Watcher. That's your 4th. So even if they deal with this ephemeral Watcher, they kill it. You just play your actual Watcher from your hand. And then even if they can maybe kill that, you might have one of your other copies of Fading Memories to copy again and play another 0 mana one. So it's like this. It has the same inevitability of the Ledger's Atrocity list. It just goes about it in a different, more proactive way, which I really like to see.
Yeah, the deck is exactly what you're saying. It's just good in and of itself without the combo finish, and then the combo finish is extremely strong. I remember the first time my opponent, copied the Watcher and put it into play, and I killed it, and I was like, haha, sucker, not today. And then they played the actual copy for free, and I was like, pinwheel, concede, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
That's pretty good. That's I'm like, so wait a minute. Those count as 2 more. So now that Watcher is 0. Let's do the math.
Oh,
that's
I'm dead.
4, and then we die. Yeah. So yeah, pretty good. And I just saw today, actually, before we started recording this, that one of the people, I think it might be the Southeast Asia server, but one of the people that's number 1 on one of the ladders is playing that exact list. I know one of our testing teammates also Jay Sensational just went straight to Masters, whipped through Diamond in like a day playing the deck. And I'm not surprised because I've been getting beat up by it on the ladder for a while. And I tried playing TF Fizz for a while, and I was just getting hammered back down. And I was really wondering how TF Fizz was at the top of the NA ladder, just seas of it, just everywhere. And I was like, why? How are they beating this Lissandra Trundle list? I wasn't really sure. And I think, like, my feeling is that a lot of the people that we're seeing that were there that were playing TF Fizz, I think they're just, a lot of them are very good players, right? Those are some of the best players on the ladder. They're, of course, playing one of the best decks. They will have a pretty good win percentage. And it was just kind of a matter of time, I think, until enough people at that range of the ladder up at the top started playing Lissandra Trundle. I think a lot of them just weren't playing it, and they just weren't seeing a lot of it. And now that people are starting to play it, I think we're starting to see that metagame start to shift a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Now, keep in mind, like I say, Lissandra Trundle beats Fizz TF, and it does, probably better than any other actually good deck that I've seen. But it's still like 60-40,
Yeah,
which is good. But like, this is your strongest opponent for Fizz TF. You lose 10%. Like, that's negligible. Not negligible, but like considering all your other matchups, because it just beats everything else. Um,
yeah,
So that's why Fizz TF is still so strong. It's like, okay, I queued into anything but Lissandra Trundle. I just curb stomp them because I'm doing stupid things. And then, oh no, I queued into Lissandra Trundle. That's fine. I still am like, this is a very winnable matchup. And we've talked about this before on the Runeterra show. The better player you are, the better Fizz TF gets. It has such a high skill ceiling, one of the highest in the game, in my opinion, that even like the better the Fizz TF players are, the less good all its counters get. Anivia used to be the old Fizz TF counter, right? But then once you get to the super, super, super high level, Fizz TF is actually favored in that matchup. We're talking super high level. We're talking like top 5 players at A level, right? But still, the fact that that deck is so powerful that if you play it that well, it's favored against its counters is it's so good. And that's why you see the best players at the top with Fizz TF is just because it's currently better than everything else.
totally. Yeah, and we've seen that time and time again, like with Go Hard previously before it got nerfed. It was the same sort of thing. You could beat some Go Hard players with a lot of different decks, but then when you put it in the hands of some of the top players, the deck was just filthy unfair, just doing ridiculous things and really, really difficult to beat. Any other thoughts about Lissandra Trundle? You think it's tier 1?
I do think it's tier 1. We have to kind of wait for the meta to shake up, and then there is an expected TF nerf, like we talked about, so we'll see kind of what that does to the meta. You did ask if it's viable in tournaments, and I would say yes. I won Fight Night last week with it in my lineup. I'm bringing it again this week just because I like to play it. Last week I played the Ledros list. Now I'm playing Spectral Matron. So we'll see how it does. But yeah, I definitely think this is a tournament viable deck. It has good matchup tables across the board. And if your plan is to not ban TF Fizz, I think you should definitely include it.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of its matchup tables, I'm curious, what does it not line up well against?
I've had a very hard time against the bigger aggressive decks. Bigger being like creature size. So like the Sivir LeBlanc decks with like Ruin Runner give me a bit of a hard time. LeBlanc Ash with its trappers and the Yetis, like the 5/5s, the Hearthguard guy that makes your dudes bigger, and they just draw cards because you're like most of your removal is damage based, like literally all of it except for some vengeances and like one ruination. So if everything's a 5/5, you're just like shit. Like these 3 avalanches in my hand look real bad right now. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, and especially the Sivir LeBlanc one because they sit there and they pile out these guys that are hard for you to deal with like one card or like Renekton, Sivir, whatever. The bigger aggressive overwhelm decks essentially is what I'm getting at,
right.
because they back it up with a counter spell on your like important turn. Normally, you like control the board, control the board, control the board. All right, it's turn 7, Ruination, and then I take over the game. But now I have to sit there and go, okay, control the board, control the board, control the board, control the board. Okay, I cast this Ruination, and if they have counterspell, I lose the game. So now what do I do? Like, do I try to play around it and possibly just lose straight up, or do I cast it and just cross my fingers really hard, which I hate doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it gives those decks a lot of power against the Lissandra Trundle list.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it harkens back to why those kind of decks tend to be good in tournaments, because they also tend to be good against like TF Fizz, which has a hard time against big overwhelm, maybe with a shield on them creatures. And so yeah, it's two decks that could potentially be good for different overwhelm big fatty strategies.
Mhm.
Yeah, good to know. What else we got? What else is doing good on the ladder that you've seen? Anything else that's interesting or that you've seen people climbing with?
Yeah, right now being the last like 2 days, Fiora Shen is absolutely taking over. The new version
Mm.
that runs the Aegis instead of Relentless Pursuit is everywhere, and it's absolutely crushing. I think in Fight Night lineup, like 5 of the 8 people in NA are running Fizz TF Fiora Shen.
Oh wow.
So Fizz TF is like practically a given for most of these lineups. But if you can only run one other deck and you choose to bring Fiora Shen, that should really tell you something about the state of the deck. These players think it's that strong. They think it's better than the Zoe Aph decks. They think it's better than these new Overwhelm decks. They think it's better than the Azir decks. And I would have to agree. It's very powerful. It lines up better into the Lissandra Trundle decks than a lot of other things because again, you have the quick aggression. You're not weak to avalanche, and you back it up with a counter spell, which is very important. Kind of like Zoe Lee in that regard. You have that quick aggression. You can temple people out, and then on the important turn, you have the bastion. You have the deny, right, to put the game away. So yeah, if you're having trouble climbing and you want to fall back on something more familiar, give Fiora Shen a shot.
Nice. Yeah, I've definitely been beat up by Fiora a few times on the ladder. So you think it's a ladder deck? It's kind of like it's sort of good against everything, right? It just always has game. Isn't that? I've heard
Yeah,
people say that like it's the reason people bring it to tournaments is because it's like close to even against almost everything. There's nothing that really blows it out or that you're too scared of. On the flip side, there's not a lot of decks that you're absolutely crushing, but you tend to have like an edge against a lot of things. Is that kind of the case?
yeah, that's what I would say. There's a joke about the deck that it's like the perfect third deck for your lineup. Like you have the 2 decks you want to play, and then your third deck's Fiora Shen because it's like filler. It's good in any lineup. It never sucks. It's always like a pretty good deck, no matter what point in the game we're at. Um, and yeah, like you said, it just has game against everything. And no matter what your like ban priority is, or your like whether you're targeting lineup or whatever, Fiora Shen is probably not bad. It's gonna just do pretty good. And often that's just what you're looking for.
Yeah, totally. It also doesn't screw up with any of your other like region lock or like card lock. Like there aren't other
Mhm.
like, decks that have that region combo or that play those champions. So it's always kind of just free.
But then I can't play
Um
my other Shen decks.
oh no, you're what do you got? What do you got? Tell us what your Shen decks are.
I don't know, like Lulu Shen. Yeah,
Oh,
that's a real deck, I
that's
promise.
that's yeah, look for that one down in the description. Don't look too hard. It won't be there. Um speaking of tournaments, we have a little bit of a tournament announcement. Do you want to
We do.
you want to fill who wants to do it? You want to do it? Should I do it? Should we both do it?
I'll do it. I'll start it, and then you can take over.
Okay, sounds good. I like it.
So we are obviously a podcast.
We are.
We're about forming a community. We are, in fact, a podcast. You heard it here first. And our main goal, as not just a podcast, but as like a community, is to form a community aimed at bettering players, bringing people to the next level, no matter where you're starting. If you're a bronze player or a masters player who wants to break into the tournament scene, and so we thought, what better way to help out the community than to have our own tournament so people can get some practice in. It's going to be a week before seasonal, and it's going to have $1,000 prize pool, which is,
Boom.
I think, the biggest there's been outside of seasonal.
Yeah, the community ones tend to be around 200 to 500. I'm sure there must have been like one that was bigger.
There's
At any
probably
rate,
been that I just haven't seen. Yeah.
it's pretty good. It's the best we
Yes.
could muster.
Yes.
Yeah, it's, we're trying to give people, I think, what we want to see from content, whether it's the podcast, whether it's our learning streams in the Patreon, all the way to tournaments. I know that, when I'm practicing for a tournament, there's nothing better than tournament experience. Every time you go to a tournament and you like learn so much, you're like, oh, I would have done this differently. I would have changed that card. I would have played this deck instead. And now you get to do all that a week before and win some sweet cash money. Who doesn't like that? Also, you get to potentially have your game cast by the new formed J&Bay casting team, TM pending. We'll be casting the tournament. And I mean, like, if you like the podcast, come see us live. It's going to be a good time. I'm super hyped for it. I'm excited. I can't wait. It's going to be our first one. Hopefully many more to follow. And, speaking about tournaments, what kind of little tidbits of information do we have to share for people maybe going to their tournaments? Maybe it's their first tournament. Maybe it's their first couple tournaments. I've only played like total. I played 2 seasonals. I've played a fight night, like maybe 3 or 4 community tournaments. So like maybe 10 tops, maybe 10 tournaments tops. And I feel like every time I learned so much more. I just keep ramping up my knowledge base. So I'm pretty excited to dive into this topic with you. I'm gonna let you kick it off though. I want to hear your thoughts about like what are some tips you're giving to someone going into like their first tournaments that maybe people didn't know. Ooh, other real quick caveat, the 3 decks pick a ban thing coming from Magic, that was like, I had no idea what that was. We play one deck, you sideboard with it. That's always how it has been. The pick 3 and ban is like, man, that's a totally different animal. And there's a totally different, there's multiple different strategies revolved around how to do that, what's correct, what's not correct.
Yeah, that part was really tough for me. Because I also came from a Magic background, as you guys know. And I consider myself very, very good at taking one deck, tweaking it for the meta, and really understanding that deck. So coming to Runeterra, it was like I have to pick 3 decks, 3, and people get to ban one of them. What if they ban my good one, right?
Typically,
that
also that
was
happens.
really tough. Yeah, that was really tough. I suffered for it my first seasonal. I made it through the open playing decks that I felt comfortable with. I had my one very good deck that I was like very strong with, which was Draven Ezreal. And then I played 2 decks that I felt I could play at like a high enough level, which was like Callista Mistwraiths and like Pirate Aggro or something.
Nice.
And then, I got to top 32 and I switched my lineup and I played things I was less comfortable with and I ended up losing. The second time, I was much more prepared. I knew how the format worked. I understood the prep I needed to like do in order to feel confident in my lineup, in order to be able to switch my decks and my like tech around without losing points to unfamiliarity, things like that. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about it. We have been talking a lot with our Patreon tournament team recently because there's tournaments coming up. We have like Duels of Runeterra, and a lot of them are playing in their first tournaments. So these are questions we've been fielding a bunch. And the number one question, I don't know about you, but the number one question I get is, what deck should I bring? Every time.
Yep.
What deck should I bring? And I tell them, like, there's a lot that goes into picking 3. But I'm going to give you, if you're playing in your first tournament, here's the answer. And this is the only answer you should think of. Pick 3 decks you're comfortable playing. That's it. Do not overthink it. Don't pick things you think is strong in the meta, but you haven't really played very much. Don't pick what Alan Z's playing because he said it's really good in tournaments. Pick 3 decks that you can play well and play the tournament, get that experience. Later, you can start thinking about constructing a lineup, targeting a certain deck, how you're going to ban and how that affects your deck lineup and like your flex slots and things like that. But right now, if it's your first tournament, pick 3 decks you can play. That's it.
Totally. Yeah, even if it's your first couple tournaments. And another little caveat, a little piece of info, I think, with that. I know that there's like charts out there that are kind of breaking down win percentages of certain matchups and stuff that people, throw around when they're thinking about what to ban with their lineup. It's really difficult to do because you're not sure which of your decks are going to get banned. So then it's not like all three of your decks have the exact same matchup against all the decks. So I found that literally you kind of know which decks you tend to perform well against or not perform well against from the ladder. You're just like, there's that one deck that you're just like, oh man, I never beat that deck. Like that deck always gets me. I don't know what it is. I don't understand it, something. And then there's other decks where you're like, nah, I always beat that deck. Like that's like, I'm good there. I think just going with what you feel, like what you do or don't, like if you struggle against TF Fizz, just ban TF Fizz. I mean, first off, probably just ban TF Fizz. Is also if you want to just default to banning TF Fizz, that's probably correct. But after that, though, whatever's giving you trouble, whatever you just like, you struggle to beat in general on the ladder or anything, probably ban that. Don't worry too much about like, oh, what's supposed matchups are actually good or bad. You'll know when you see that deck. You're like, nah, I don't want to play against that one. And likewise, if you feel comfortable against a deck, that's probably fine. And then also, if there's a deck you don't know what it really does or what's going on with it, because you're going to see all kinds of decks. It's going to be a huge, wide open smorgasbord of selection. Maybe ban something like that. If like that looks really strong and powerful, and I don't know what's going on there, let's just not. Let's go with we'll play against the decks we've seen before. We'll get this deck right out of there right now. What about the next level, though? What about once people are, familiar with, maybe they have more than 3 decks that they feel like they can play well. Maybe there's like 6 or 7 or 8. Then what's the next step once you're feeling confident that you can play multiple decks, but you're trying to make a cohesive lineup?
So this is where it gets complicated, and there's a lot of different fields of thought, but this level is where understanding of the meta is really key. If you have a bad read on what's good and bad, your lineup's going to suffer when you try to target a certain part of the meta or defend against a certain part. But basically, what I like to do is I like to pick a deck or strategy that I plan on banning. Right? That's usually first. I have like a deck that I want to play no matter what, and then I pick usually a strategy that's good against it. So like for seasonals, I'm gonna use the last seasonals as an example because I won.
You won seasonals?
I know, right? Yep, I won.
Whoa!
So what I came into, I wanted to play an Aphelios deck, and I wanted to play Zoe Lee. And TF Fizz did well against both of those decks. So I went, well, I'll just ban TF Fizz, right? Or the most aggressive deck. I'm just going to ban that, and I'm going to play to beat everything else. So, for reference, I played Tom Kench Aphelios, TF Fizz, and Zoe Lee. And so I expected to see a lot of Zoe Lee, a lot of Fiora Shen, and a lot of Aphelios, and a lot of TF Fizz, but I'm banning that so we don't talk about it. So these 3 decks, how do I beat them? Because I'm playing essentially these 3 decks, right? I'm playing Zoe Lee and I'm playing Aphelios. I'm not playing Shen, but they kind of play similarly to the others. Champion-centric deck. So what I did was I went bigger. I played cards that are less good into aggressive matchups. And I cut the cards that maybe stabilize the game early against aggro to win points in these like so-called mirror matches, because I knew that I was going to ban the aggressive deck. So I wanted the edge against everything else in the field. And that's one way of building a lineup. You can plan to ban something and then pick things that all lose to that deck, right? Or the other way to do it is to target a deck. So maybe I'm coming into it and I'm saying, I never, ever, ever want TF Fizz to win a game. So I'm going to play Trundle Lissandra with 3 Ice Shards, 3 Avalanche, and 3 Ravines. And I'm going to play other decks with 3 Withering Whales in the box, maybe like Spooky Karma or I don't know. And then I'm going to play another deck that beats TF Fizz like Overwhelm, right? Now, I wouldn't recommend this, by the way, because you're still going to lose to TF Fizz because the deck is nuts. But that's the strategy, because they have to win once with each of their decks. So if you can prevent a specific deck from ever winning, then you, in theory, can beat your opponent. I don't recommend this kind of lineup it's very tough to pull off because sometimes you just lose to the deck. That's how card games work. And what happens if your opponent just doesn't have it, right? Like you just did all this prep and your deck's built to beat one deck, and then they just don't have it, and you're going to lose to normal stuff. My preferred way is just to take 3 decks that are good against most things. Just do powerful things. Play what you're comfortable with and find your edges in that.
Yeah, 100% agree. Especially with the, trying to target a deck just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. You can do that if the field's really small. Like you're talking about, you're playing Fight Night. So there's 8 players. How many of them are bringing TF Fizz?
6.
Yeah, so like 80% or something, like 6 out of 8 players have TF Fizz. You could target TF Fizz then in a tournament that small. But in a tournament like Seasonals, there's 1,000 people in it. It's just, there's too much variance. There's going to be too many people not bringing TF Fizz. I'm interested when you're talking about the lineup that you brought to Seasonals and how you, wanted to beat those sort of mirror matches, the other powerful decks. And so you made your decks a little bit weaker to aggro. Did you run into any triple aggro lineups, or were you able to just dodge those completely?
Yeah, I did, because top 32 is only 5 rounds, right? So I did run into, I think, only 1 round of triple aggro. Raptera's lineup was also aggressively slanted, but it wasn't like the discard aggro, pirate burn, Fizz TF lineup that you expect to see. I did run into triple aggro, and like I did make my list weaker to aggro, but that doesn't mean I'm like I can't beat them.
Yeah.
It just means maybe I lose a few points against them. And I was willing to give that up to gain the edge against the mirror matches. So yeah, I did run into it and it was close. But we got the win and we moved on, and I continued crushing the decks that I set out to crush.
Yep. Fair enough. One of the points that you made talking about, you're going to ban a deck, say TF Fizz, and then you play decks that have a bad matchup against that deck, ends up doing an interesting thing where one of the things you can do, which maybe isn't an option yet in Runeterra because there's not like a big tournament every single weekend, but in back in the Magic days, one of the things that I learned from Seth Manfield was that he would look at shout out Seth Manfield, by the way. He would look at the tournament results because there's a big tournament in Magic every single weekend. And so what people will do is they look at what wins and they're like, okay, focus on that. They play it, or they
play what beats it.
Or they play what beats it, yeah. Well, another thing to do is look at what did poorly. Look at what did really bad. And then that's probably not going to get played very much the next weekend. So whatever those decks that did poorly were good against, those decks are probably that. And so exactly what you're saying here, when you're like, okay, we're going to ban TF Fizz, and then we're going to play decks that had a bad TF Fizz matchup. What ends up probably happening there is the other decks that aren't TF Fizz, those are probably good matchups for those decks that had the bad matchup against TF Fizz. Because you end up in that sort of rock, paper, scissors, and now you've just you've positioned yourself correctly, whether you meant to or not. It just ends up kind of working out that way. Because if you didn't have a good matchup against TF Fizz and you didn't have a good matchup against other stuff, well, I don't know why you're picking those decks. Yeah. So you're probably you're probably in a good spot right there. So I think that's like really key. And so with the tournaments coming up, I mean, like we're talking about, the format has not changed a whole lot. TF is still very popular, still kind of king. You're going to be playing this Saturday in the tournament. I guess tomorrow now. So for this weekend and probably the weekends coming up before anything changes, what are you looking? Are you still looking to, in an open field? Are you still looking to ban TF Fizz? And if so, what are the 3 decks are you bringing? Because we talked about Lissandra, Trundle being a good new deck, but it's also good against TF. So if you're banning TF Fizz, isn't that kind of contrary?
If I am not bringing Lissandra Trundle if my plan is to ban TF Fizz.
Okay.
Not that the deck's bad against other things, but why? I don't know. It feels like you're giving up one of your best matchups, and then you're bringing the deck anyway. It's just your deck better be goddamn phenomenal. So I know a lot. This is a very competitively slanted podcast, and a lot of people see me as a player first, which I am. Um, but I also like to have fun sometimes. So in this
Ooh,
Duels of
hot take.
Runeterra tournament, I'm bringing Zoe Karma, Yasuo Katarina, and Zoe Lee. No, not Zoe Lee, because Ezreal Karma, Zoe Lee, and Yasuo Katarina. All tier 1 decks, right?
Sorry, did you just say Yaz Katarina? There must be some static
Yeah,
on the
I
line.
did. I did. It sounded fun. I wanted to play a lot of Ionia decks. I know. Is it a competitive good idea? No, but it sounded fun, and I already have to try hard for Fight Night, so I figured I would try less hard on the next tournament
I just want to
and just put it all
apologize to
into.
all of our listeners for Bay having fun. It's completely unacceptable. It won't
Yeah,
happen again.
I can hear people unsubscribing from the Patreon as I speak.
Awesome. Okay. Well, for those of us that like to win, imagine it was seasonals instead. What would you bring and what would you tell people to bring?
All right. I'm imagining it was seasonals. You need to be playing or banning TF Fizz or both. It's the best thing.
Ideally
It's the
both.
best thing you could be doing. Yeah, I did both in seasonals. Just bring it. Whatever. If you can't play it, then don't bring it. Don't like just have it because I told you to.
Yes.
But yeah, you should be playing or banning probably both TF Fizz. I would recommend an Aphelios deck, be it Henneky's Diana Aphelios deck with the Atrocity at the top, the Nightfall version, or the Zoe Aphelios Splashes Boxtopus. Both have been doing very well for me on ladder and in tournaments, and I think they have a lot of game against just about everything. Your third deck, kind of up to you. And again, like I'm giving you ideas. This is not set in stone. Don't just bring what I tell you to. Again, the number one rule is bring what you can play. Play what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
So don't switch off the LeBlanc Ash deck that you're very comfortable with just because I don't tell you to bring it. This is just what I would bring. I would probably bring Diana Aphelios with Henneky's, Fizz TF, and then probably Zoe Lee because I'm very, very comfortable with that deck. Would I recommend it to other people? Probably not. But like, if you see Kever or me in a tournament, we're probably bringing it because it's the deck we have the most reps with and we're the most comfortable with.
Yep. That makes perfect sense. Speaking of Zoe Lee, what are your thoughts on Zoe Lee right now? How does it do into like Lissandra Trundle or the new Overwhelm decks or maybe the Azir aggro decks? Like, where is it at in the meta? Because it was one of the best decks before Shurima came out.
Yeah, it was one of the best decks before Shurima came out. But even in Masters, it had like a 49% win rate, like maybe. So it's like the best deck in the same way like Akali is one of the best mid laners in League for all you who play League. They have such a high skill cap that they're the best if you can play them the best. If you can't, don't bring them. Like it's a hard deck to play optimally. But if you can, it's very, very powerful. I actually think it's still quite good. The extra counter spells in Shurima throw me off. I never see it coming.
Yeah,
like, all right,
gets me
yeah,
every time. Every time.
Gonna kick this Azir real hard, win the game, and then they counter my Dragon's Rage, and I'm like,
oops.
What?
Yeah.
So I still think it's very good though. Lissandra Trundle, it moved away from like the 3 copies of Sisters and like Harsh Winds and Flash Freeze, which makes the Lee matchup so much better. Like anytime you're not frostbiting my Lee, I'm pretty happy with it. You have to play the matchup carefully. I very much like my list of Lee that I won seasonals with right now, with the 2 copies of Homecoming and the Veiled Temple and the Fangs, because it gives you so much more game against the Avalanche and the Ravines, and you just have a lot more punching power in these long, drawn-out games.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm definitely not spilling coffee over here. I didn't spill. I'm good. Let's see. So those are like, I feel like we should talk about lineups that are also not, like the ones that we're talking about here with like Aphelios, Lee Sin. Like these are those are the most complex decks, right? Those are the hardest decks to play.
Yeah. I literally just named like the 3 hardest decks in the game.
Yeah, and like you say, they are decks that will reward play skill and time. If you want to, improve the game, you will get back out what you put into these decks, because there is a lot of possibility there. But damn, they're hard to play. Like, you're talking a lot of time, a lot of effort. So let's ignore those. Let's ignore those like champions. What's next
Sure.
down the list? Like, what would be, in your opinion, a good lineup to bring that was not bringing those champs, or maybe just like one of them?
Okay. I'm a huge fan of Fiora Shen right now, and I think Fiora
Hmm.
Shen is playable at all levels. It's dominated ladder at every rank for a very long time. And I think it's really well positioned right now. You have denies to beat the more late game, like controlling decks like Lissandra Trundle. You are aggressive, which I think it's very important to be proactive right now. Even the reactively styled decks have a proactive combo esque finish. Lissandra Trundle has the Watcher with Matrons. Um, the Invoke decks and Nightfall run atrocities to like combo kill you out, right?
Yeah.
You have to close the game because all these decks have such powerful either engines, draw spells, or like couple card combinations that you just have to finish the game at some point. So yes, I really like Fiora Shen. Nice proactive game plan backed up by very strong spells and counter spells to keep your opponent off balance. I think LeBlanc Ash, which I mentioned a couple times, is incredibly underrated right now. I don't know why people aren't playing it. You have such a strong curve of um the Glory Seeker on 2 with Challenger, Trapper on or LeBlanc on 3, Ash on 4, Reckoning on 5, just blows decks out of the water. Blows them out of the water. And you have some of the strongest draw in the game for some fucking reason. I don't really know why. You have the Trifarian Assessor, which is drawing you like 4 or 5 cards when you play it. And Whispered Words is now in the deck, which might just be the best draw spell in the game. It's just draw 2 for like 2 when you enable Reputation. This is probably the best Reputation deck. Very, very strong. I think more people should be playing it. It's not my style, so I don't talk about it a lot. But if I'm not going to be playing the style of decks I mentioned before, I'd really look into this one. I'm not sure where I'd go to for a third deck. Do you have anything you would be slide in there?
I mean, it could just be a TF Fizz. I know we were talking about only playing one of those. I was like, maybe a TF Fizz plus two other decks before you started going, was what I was thinking. I want to talk a little bit more about the Ash LeBlanc deck, though, because I think you're right. I think what's the keyword? It's if you've dealt 5 damage. It's reputation.
It's Reputation. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like reputation, this happens every time a new set comes out. There's like some keyword or ability that just kind of like slides under the radar and no one's like really understands or just thinks it's not particularly good or exciting, and it ends up just being like the nuts. And I think this is like one of them. Like you're saying, that card, I forget what it is. It's 4 mana, draw
Whispered,
2. Was it Whisper?
whispered words.
Whispered
Whispered
words.
words. Like
Yeah. Okay, so it's Whisper words. Okay.
yeah, exactly.
And then and then it becomes 2 mana, draw 2, which is absolutely insane. And like you're saying, in that deck, it's really easy to turn on, right? Like from turn 2, you're dropping creatures with 5 power. So if your creature doesn't die, it gets to hit again. And so potentially by like turn 4, you already have reputation, and now all of these cards turn on and become very powerful. And I agree with you. I think the reason people aren't playing it as much as they should be is because like it's just like not, one, it's not like understood really well, and it's not like super sexy. But man, I've been
Yeah.
blown up by the deck a whole bunch. The new is it Rune Runner? The 6/4 Overwhelm
Yeah. It's for
Spell
like the
Shield.
LeBlanc Sivir. Very strong.
Yeah,
Very strong.
that was when the set came out. That was one of the cards I was like, this is going to give people problems. This card is, I mean, like if you think about the Rhino, that's a 7/7 Overwhelm Spell Shield that you can invoke for. This is it's a
Destroyer.
6.
Yeah.
The Destroyer, yeah.
Like
So
that. Yeah.
it's this is a 6/4, so it's a little bit smaller, but it's 5 mana instead of 7 plus invoking for it. So like it's just so much cheaper.
And then you combine
yeah,
it with these stream of cards like Exhaust or the
yeah,
Renekton's Ruthless something. giving things vulnerable, you slam for a ton of damage. And the 3/1, I think it's called Rockhopper, where it gives you the landmark that gives the next unit you play vulnerable. There's been so many board states where I'm like, okay, my 1/2 has vulnerable, and they just played Ruin Runner, and I can't, like, I have like an 8/8 and I can't even block it because it's just like my guy has vulnerable, and it lets them. It almost gives these decks like a form of reach, which normally you
Yeah.
would accomplish with like burn spells, right? Okay, I've stabilized the board. I don't have to worry about that. Now I have to worry about his burn. But these units like Ruin Runner and stuff like that, it really does give the deck a way to squeeze in those last points of damage. So yeah, LeBlanc Sivir is the deck we're mostly referring to, or like LeBlanc Renekton or something like that. Very strong. It's been doing very well, kind of under the radar. Again, you were talking about how strong the reputation keyword is, and I don't think it's the keyword that's so strong. I think the cards are strong already. Like Whispered Words, 4 mana draw 2 is salvage. Salvage has been playable the entire like duration of the game,
Yeah.
but it's salvage with nothing but upside in a region that shouldn't be able to do that. Like
Hmm.
Noxus right now is drawing cards better than some of the other regions,
That's
which is
wild.
insane. It's insane. So yeah, these decks are very strong, have a high skill floor, which means that even if you're just starting to play the game for like the first time, you're probably going to do okay. They do have skill expression. It's not like they're bonehead, smooth brain decks, right? They're still decks that you can pilot better than others. And yeah, people like just aren't prepared for them.
Yes. Yeah. And they have, decently good matchups into some of the popular decks,
Like
like
TF is.
TF Fizz. Exactly.
Or
So
Zoe
interesting. Yeah. So interesting though. So imagine let's finish out the lineup. Say it was like a TF Fizz.
Sure.
So we got Fiora, Shen, TF Fizz, and one of the LeBlanc decks. Pick your flavor. So are you still banning TF Fizz with
Probably
that
not.
lineup?
If I was going to bring like one of the LeBlanc decks, I would probably bring some other Overwhelm deck as well.
Okay.
I really like the idea of bringing like a Ricorex style deck. Have you seen those?
No, what
It's
is
the
that?
one with like, okay, so Ricorex is a player and he's famous for playing Overwhelm, like the
Oh,
Freljord Noxus style, uh, Wild Claw, the 7/6,
yeah.
that kind of deck, right? And it does very well into these smaller deck strategies. It just beats the shit out of TFIs because you just play big thing and you just run them over. Like
Front of him.
TFIs can make a lot of chump blockers. Your chump blockers look real cute when I'm attacking with Sejuani in my 7/6 and I have Battle Fury in hand, right?
Yeah.
So I would probably try to fit that in the lineup, and then like it's kind of what you would call like soft targeting a deck. You're like soft targeting TFIs. What that means is that your entire lineup isn't built around beating TFIs, but your deck happens to line up well against TFIs.
Hmm.
So you don't have to worry about banning it. You can ban something else that does something more powerful. Maybe it just goes over the top of you. Maybe they play a 3 Ruination deck. Just get that out of here or something. So I would like to see one of those included in the lineup.
Alongside, okay, so what's the final 3 then? What gets cut then if you add another Overwhelm deck?
Honestly, whichever one you're least comfortable with playing. I would probably play. Oh, that's tough actually. I like Fizz TF's a better deck. I just hate playing it. So I would probably play like Sivir LeBlanc, a Ricorex deck, Ricorex Overwhelm, and then probably Fizz TF. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you ban anything that plays Ruination, pretty much.
Yeah.
But
I like the sense of that.
I'm saying this, but I don't have the experience with the Overwhelm decks and the LeBlanc Sivir decks. I don't like these kind of decks, so I don't play them. So my advice here is less sound than it would be if we were talking about your bans when you're playing Zoe Lee or something. I don't have the experience. I have played against them and I do play at a high level, so I like understand basically how it works. But take this with a grain of salt.
Still
Someone who has a lot of
theoretical.
experience with Overwhelm could probably give you better advice on it.
Yeah, that's fair. One thing you did mention though is like soft targeting, which I heard that term thrown around a lot Pushby on our team was talking about soft targeting Go Hard when he won seasonals. Shout out Pushby. And I didn't really understand it at first. I was like, okay, like you're kind of targeting it, but you're not targeting it. But basically, what you're saying is that you are okay playing into this certain deck. So, for instance, TF Go Hard previously, now TF Fizz. Your lineup is fine playing against them, but you're not like nose open against other lineups. You're not just like, okay, I'm going to beat this deck and only this deck, and then I'm going to get wrecked by other things. No, it's like you still have game against the board, against like the wide variety of decks, and you happen to be, feeling pretty comfortable going into TF Fizz or whatever the popular deck is that you're kind of worried about. That's what soft targeting means, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. No, for sure. Like for example, in my seasonal lineup, I was soft targeting Aphelios decks because I expected them to be a large portion of the field. I was not going to ban them, and so my lineup happened to line up well against them. I expected to see a lot of them, so I built my lineup to soft target them. I'm not all in on beating the Aphelios decks, right? I'm not just packing 6 deal 3 damage spells or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, my lineup, I built a lineup specifically to do well into these decks because I expected them to be in every single lineup. And it paid off. But the important part isn't to throw away all your other matchups to hope to beat one deck.
Yes. Yeah, that's the important caveat. When you're talking about like you made your deck a little bit worse against aggro to make it somewhat better against these other control decks, but not like I'm just getting rid of like I'm not even gonna play in my Lee Sin deck. I'm not gonna, like you're not going overboard crazy. Yeah.
Don't do that.
And that's important. That's where you want to be. I think it just makes perfect sense in a tournament setting. You want to have some game just about everywhere, and then feel pretty good going into what you expect to be popular. That's kind of just the best you can do.
And as the opposite spectrum, sorry to do this to you, buddy, but I'm going to use your lineup.
Oh god damn it! You know what? I deserve this.
Jason brought one aggro deck. Discard. What were your other 2 decks? You brought discard aggro.
Let's think back. It was, I think, TF Fizz, Aphelios, Zoe, and discard aggro. That was previously Feel the Rush. And I'll caveat this a little bit. I didn't really have a good third deck. I was trying to play a different Aphelios deck, like maybe Diana, and I was trying to play Lee Sin Zoe as my third deck. And I played some matches against Nick Makes Plays. Shout out Nick Makes Plays. And he just ravaged me with all of his aggro, his triple aggro lineup. Literally, it didn't matter. Pirates, he wrecked me. Discard aggro, he wrecked me. TF Fizz, he's wrecking me. And I was like, fuck, I'm not good enough at playing Zoe Lee. And so that's why I decided not to bring it. I decided to bring something I was familiar with, which originally was going to be Feel the Rush, and then ended up at last second being discard aggro because I had seen someone else with the same other 2 decks and discard aggro beat Lobster at the like round 5 to go 5-0, and I was like, oh, somebody else did it, like maybe this is a thing. So I last second changed, and then I'll let you continue on.
Which I think is a good idea. Like you realize, we talked about this before, you realize that you couldn't play Zoe Lee to its full potential. You weren't very comfortable with the deck, and you switched out for something you were more comfortable with. I think that's a great idea. What is unfortunate here is that your comprehensive lineup makes no sense.
Yeah.
You have 2 aggressive decks, Fizz TF and Discard Aggro, which is good. They're both very strong decks. And then you have one deck that's kind of out of left field. Zoe Aphelios is like a late game card advantage deck, right? So let's say I bring my LeBlanc Ash with Reckonings, and I bring my Overwhelm deck because I'm planning to beat the lower to the ground aggro decks like Fizz TF and Discard Aggro. I'm not sure exactly how those matchups playing out, but let's pretend, right? So I bring decks that beat aggro, and you have 2 aggro decks ripe for the taking, right? And then you have one deck that does well into my lineup. I just get to ban it.
Mm-hmm.
And I get to play against the 2 matchups I want. And then if my plan is I don't beat aggro, I'm playing my lineup, but I crush your Zoe Aphelios, I get to ban one of your aggro decks, flip a coin on my bad matchup. I get 2 tries to beat it, and then like I just beat your other deck. So no matter what side of the spectrum my lineup's on, I'm happy going into your lineup, right?
Yep.
Because no matter what, it's not awful for me. If you are running 3 aggro decks and you ran into my lineup, I'm worried because none of my bans are good. Like, I'm essentially banning the same style, right? No matter what. I'm just banning like the worst. And I still have to run against 2 bad decks for me. So yeah, if you'd have gone like 3 aggro or like 3 more control, I think it would have been more comprehensive. Not to say it's like wrong, but in like a theory standpoint, that's not exactly what you want to be doing. You want your lineup to have a plan.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So and that's exactly what happened. I ended up playing against a triple anti-aggro lineup round 1. They banned Aphelios Diana. I was able to squeak out game 1 with TF Fizz, just muscle, just like they almost had me, and I just went like draw a million cards, like kill you from 12 at the last possible minute. And was like, okay, we got this. Just one more, baby. No big deal. And then I load up discard aggro and just get obliterated 2 games in a row. Like, just so sad. By like turn 5, the game's pretty much over. I have like, 1 unit and like no cards in hand. And they're at like 18. I was like, oh. And it felt so bad after like doing such great work with TF Fizz and feeling really good about it, pulling the win out against like a tough matchup. Yeah, it felt really bad. But so interesting though, if I had brought 3 aggro decks, I would have been in an even worse position, theoretically.
Would you? No, you'd be in the same position because you're still playing 2 aggro decks into bad.
Well, this is the thing though. But now it's like say it's Pirates Overwhelm. Oh, sorry, Pirates discard aggro and TF Fizz. So they banned Fizz TF, and now I have like, so now I don't have Fizz TF plus 1 other deck. I just have 2 aggro decks.
This is less like in practice and more in theory.
Yeah.
3 aggro decks is strictly better than 2 aggro decks in a non-aggro deck. Fizz TF is an outlier. It's the only tier 0 deck we have in the meta. Tier 0, by the way, means strictly better than everything else. If it wasn't for TF Fizz's dominance, that wouldn't pan out the way it would, right? You're essentially like, you're losing your points that you had against my type of lineups. Like triple aggro destroys some lineups. And if you're bringing 2 aggro, 1 non-aggro, you're losing that benefit because now they just ban one of your aggro decks and you only have 1 deck that's good against them. Sure, you win with that, but then you have to win with your other deck, right? Whereas triple aggro, they ban one of your aggro decks and you run them over with the other 2. None of the matchups are good.
Yeah, it's another thing that's really interesting is that like we say triple aggro as if all aggro decks have the same, like are built the same when they're totally not. Even like we're not even talking about overwhelm aggro, which totally like shifts things differently.
Still aggro,
yeah, but then even just like discard aggro or pirates, they still have like sometimes the matchup's very good or very bad for one or the other. So we're like really generalizing in some ways. Because I love doing the theory crafting, it's fun. But like one other thing that like theoretically you could do is like, what if you had like 1 control deck, 1 aggro deck, and like 1 combo deck, and so that like no matter which one they ban, if they have 3 aggro or 3 control, then like no matter what, you have like 1 good and 1 bad matchup, and it's like who gets like the coin flip. But it just doesn't work out that way. It's so like it doesn't.
You're just losing points. They're gonna ban whatever's worse for them if they have a lineup that like has a plan, right? They're just going to ban whichever one's worse for them and then get a medium matchup, like a 50-50 and like a 60-40 for them instead of maybe getting 50-50s twice or maybe like a 40-60, 60-40 or something like that, right? So yeah, this is all like, I don't want to get the comments from you guys saying, but what about Fizz TF beats this triple aggro because discard aggro is this. Like this isn't. We're not talking about the meta right now. These are more broad strokes. These theories, these lineup theories, they're more to just impart how lineups work in general more than how they work in the current meta right now.
Yeah, and I think going all the way back to what we first said about play what you're comfortable with and play what's powerful. Okay, the most powerful thing that you're comfortable with is really like where it leaves off. And I think if you look back at my lineup there with those 3 decks, you can pinpoint a little bit even less being like, okay, you had one aggro deck, and more being like you had one deck that was kind of just bad. Like it's not like discard aggro is necessarily bad, but I wouldn't say it's on the same level as like TF is definitely, or like even the Aphelios list at the time that was pre nerf.
Like TF Aphelios was like nuts.
So
or even like Zoe Aph. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so bringing something that was like, a Fiora Shen or a Lee deck, even Feel the Rush, I feel like would have been better in that spot than discard aggro. I just feel like that deck itself was a bit of a weak link. I don't know what the stats are. I'd be interested to see how many people made it with discard aggro compared to didn't make it. But I bet you that deck was just like not quite powerful enough when you're talking about the other decks it's going up against.
That current point in the meta, I felt like discard aggro was just kind of like fine. It was just fine. The Fangs was everywhere. TF was in every single lineup, which matches up very well against discard because red card's absurd and gold card stuns your crowd favorite. So yeah, I just didn't love it. And once again, I'm going to say this every single time we talk about tournament lineups. You should play what you're comfortable with first, and then you should play the most powerful decks. It's just because you're just going to win more games because you're doing more powerful things. There's been in every single card game ever, there's been decks that are just like the best decks. And if you're not playing the best decks, you're just giving up points. Like if you're not 100%. Playing TF Fizz in your lineups, you better have a goddamn good reason, right? It's insane. It beats everything.
Yeah.
Why are you not playing this deck?
Yeah. And you can't really hammer that one home enough. I've always been in Magic. I was the guy that wanted to beat everyone by doing the side, coming out of left field with something that no one saw coming and be like,
cool rogue list.
Look how smart I am. I have crushed you with my crazy tier 2 deck. And guess what? It basically almost never happened.
You lose.
Yeah.
You lose
and then I would pick up, I'd pick up whatever the best thing was. And it was like playing on easy mode all of a sudden. It was like, oh, like I made some pretty bad mistakes this game, but I still win because I'm doing the stupid thing. Like, I still have a bunch of burbles and a Twisted Fate and like a bunch of burn, and I'm going to pick a card, draw like 4 cards next turn and just bury you. No matter how much your Pirates deck like played on curve just perfectly, still just going to bury you. So doing powerful things has always and will always be very important. And that was my big takeaway from seasonals. Was like, man, this discard aggro list, I wish I had played something just more powerful. Because also my hands felt tied. I felt like I was able to outplay my opponent with my TF Fizz deck. And then with the discard aggro list, I was just like, there was only so much I could do. The deck was just
sometimes
only so powerful.
Avalanche and you lose the game.
Yeah. So we're hitting an hour. It's that time to wrap it up. That was a good hour.
I like that. That we had a lot of good things. Good topic. I love talking about tournament lineups. It's such a cool topic that like us as Magic players never got to experience. I think it really adds another level of strategy to tournament play.
Yeah, having to be good at 3 decks is
tough.
It's exciting. It's hard. It's fun. It's unique. Yeah, and then the bands create a whole different. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Speaking of tournaments, I really wish there were more awesome tournaments to play in. So I'm so glad that we're going to be hosting one for $1,000.
What weekend is it? Can we give a date? Because I don't.
April 17th and 18th.
Cool. Be there.
Mark your calendars. Mark your calendars.
You do have to do something to enter.
You do have to be part of our Patreon. Let me tell you about the Patreon. I was thinking about this today, babe. So twice a week, we do a 2-hour training session with our Patreon. For an hour, we talk about Runeterra, we talk about decks, we talk about the meta.
It's
and
like
then
but we field questions.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a back and forth. And then for an hour, we actually play games and again discuss. It's basically like, I was thinking about this. It's basically like a group training session. You can get one-on-one training. Also, by the way, if you want to get seasonal number 2 winner Majin Bay to give you one-on-one training for as cheap as $25 an hour, you can do so over at the Patreon. But this is basically like a group session of training where we're like discussing plays, or why we're doing certain things, not doing certain things. People can pick our brains. So we do 2 of those calls a week for 2 hours. So that's 4 hours a week, times 4 weeks. So that's 16 hours of basically group training sessions for $5 a month. Ridiculous. Where do you get value that good? And they're recorded, so you can enjoy them. You don't have to be there live. You can go see them afterwards. And also, you get free entry. Well, not really free, but being part of the Patreon, you get to join our tournament with a $1,000 prize pool. So that is the caveat if you want to play in that tournament, April 17th to 18th. It's $2 though. Minimum.
Yeah,
the
our
minimum
lowest tier is like $2. So
lowest tier is $2.
$2 to be in our $1,000 prize pool tournament, which seems pretty good.
Yeah, and I gotta think if this one's goes as good as we think it's gonna go, we'll probably just do these every time. We'll just keep them going.
Yeah,
every 2 months. Seems like a good time. Good testing before seasonals too. Man, I really want to top 32 this seasonals. Like literally everyone on the team except for me and I guess Turtle, who slept through seasonals, has top 32. It's my time. I want it. I want it bad, and I'm gonna be keeping a close eye on our tournament to see what's doing good, what's winning. It's gonna be exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun.
All right. Well, that's
I'm
it for
really
us.
excited to commentate.
I am too.
I'm stoked about
I am too.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be throwing out all the bold play, Bay. What do you think about this one? Bold strategy, Cotton.
Tossing it back over to Bay. What do you think? Can you talk about this Fizz new deck we're seeing?
We're gonna have some fun. We're gonna have a good time. Okay, that's it for us, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and hope to see you this weekend. Some of the tournaments. Hope to see you in our Discord. Our Discord's free to join. All that, the links to the Patreon, the Discord, everything will be down in the description or the show notes, whichever way you're consuming this content. And we'll see you next Friday and every Friday after that. Bye, guys.
Peace out, guys.
Peace.